My husband, the boss, smiled and said, "You're terminated. Melissa takes your place in this $8 million company." And security just stared. I walked out knowing my hidden code was seconds from hitting, his face draining as systems died and him whispering, "What did you do to us?" I can still feel the fluorescent buzz of that conference room in downtown Charlotte, like the lights themselves were waiting to watch me break. My husband, my business partner, my closest ally for 12 years, sat at the head of the table in the chair we used to joke was ours. Today, he didn't look at me like a partner. He looked at me like a problem he'd already solved. When he slid the folder across the table, I didn't touch it. I just watched his fingers linger on the edge, tapping once, like he was savoring the moment. "Congratulations," he said, voice steady, practiced. "You're terminated." Terminated. Not "we need to talk," not "I'm sorry," not anything resembling humanity. Terminated. Like I was a vendor contract he didn't need anymore. My eyes drifted past him to Melissa, the intern I'd hired 2 years ago, the one who used to ask me how to format expense reports. She stood behind him, arms crossed, chin lifted just enough to show she had rehearsed whatever smugness she thought she earned. He kept going. "Take your old laptop. Security will escort you out. The divorce papers arrive tomorrow." Then he leaned back, stretching like he'd just finished a workout. "This $8 million company is mine now. And Melissa will take your place." He smiled. She smiled. Security stepped into the doorway like they'd been cued. And for a second, just 1 second, I felt my throat close, my chest tighten, the beginnings of humiliation boiling up like I was about to choke on it. This was the man who once held my hair back while I puked during chemo. This was the man who stood beside me when we opened our first office in a 900-square-foot space over a vape shop. This was the man who used to say we built everything together. But the worst part wasn't that he betrayed me, it was that he expected me to crumble. I picked up the laptop, the old one. The one he thought was harmless. The one he forgot was connected to the earliest stage architecture of the system he'd stolen from me piece by piece. I held it to my chest, steadying my hands. Security walked me past the bullpen, past the interns who pretended not to stare, past the glass walls still decorated with the whiteboard sketches I'd drawn months ago. I didn't say anything. I didn't look back. Outside, the heat pressed down like the whole city was exhaling. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, letting the sounds of traffic and distant construction settle around me. My hands weren't shaking anymore. Because behind the humiliation, behind the heartbreak, behind the numbness, there was something else rising. I had written the original backend code myself. Every line, every hidden layer, every override. And when he started pulling away, when the meetings got secretive, when Melissa stayed late with him for strategy sessions, I started writing something else. A failsafe. A silent switch buried so deep even asterisk sometimes forgot it existed. Until now, I opened the laptop, entered my credentials. My fingers moved on muscle memory. I could feel the sun on my back, the warmth cutting against the cold clarity settling through me. The timer hit 0. 10 minutes from the moment he fired me, the code would activate. And when it did, every lie he'd built this takeover on, every stolen asset, every doctored record, every fraudulent valuation, would fold in on itself like the floor cracking open beneath him. I closed the laptop, holding it against my hip. I didn't smile wide, just enough, because the ruin was already on its way. Looking back, I can trace everything to 2 moments, 2 clean breaks in my life where trust split open and never fully healed, even though I kept pretending it did. The first was the night my husband, Evan, came home drunk from some tech networking event in Raleigh. This was 3 years ago, long before Melissa, long before I noticed how often he said my company instead of our company. He dropped his phone on the kitchen island, screen still lit, and stumbled upstairs. I don't know why I looked. Maybe because I already felt something shifting between us. Maybe because the silence in the house that night felt too sharp. What I saw wasn't explicit, not then, just a thread of messages to a woman he saved under a fake name. Harmless on the surface, but the tone told the truth. The easy familiarity. The too fast replies. The "wish you were here" typed at 1:13 a.m. when I confronted him, he swore it was nothing. Just networking, just friendly, just harmless. He cried, I cried, and I let myself believe him. We went to counseling. We promised to work on things. I swallowed the first breach because I still believed in us, in the vision we had spent years building together. The second moment came nearly a year later, when my oncologist called with the biopsy results. Stage II, treatable but aggressive. My whole world collapsed inward. I remember sitting in the parking lot outside Novant Health, gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers went numb. I called Evan immediately. He answered on the fourth ring, muffled, irritated. I didn't know then that he was in a hotel with someone else. I wouldn't find that out until much later, after he'd already stolen my company out from under me. All I knew in that moment was that my husband sounded inconvenienced by the worst phone call of my life, but he still came to my appointments. He stayed with me during treatment. He made smoothies in the mornings and held my hand when my hair started falling out. For months, he played the role of loving partner so convincingly that I forced myself to forget all the earlier doubt. I told myself people change. I told myself crisis can bring people back together. I told myself trust could be rebuilt if the foundation was still there. The truth was uglier. He wasn't staying because he loved me. He was staying because the company was scaling. Our software had just secured its biggest licensing deal, and I was too weak to notice what he was rearranging behind closed doors. That same year, I was rewriting large parts of our backend. The system was becoming more complex, more commercially viable, more valuable to the investors he had charmed with his polished pitch decks. I was the quiet one, the technical mind, the builder. He was the face. That balance had always worked until it didn't. During chemo, there were days I coded from bed with a bucket beside me. Days where I couldn't think straight but still forced myself to keep the architecture clean and stable because I believed the company was ours. And while I was suffering through the side effects, Evan was rewriting something else entirely. Our operating agreements, our equity split, our bylaws. He used my treatment as the perfect smokescreen. When I finally reached remission, I thought we'd survived hell together. Instead, he'd been paving the runway to push me out. I ignored the signs. His late nights, his sudden protectiveness over financial documents, his insistence on hiring Melissa and keeping her close. I told myself I was paranoid because trauma distorts everything. But the truth was simpler. He'd been planning the betrayal for years. And without those two wounds, infidelity and illness, I might never have built the safeguard he didn't know existed. He thought he took everything from me. He never understood how hard it is to kill someone who's already crawled her way back from the edge. After Evan's first betrayal and the long shadow of my treatment, something in me hardened. I didn't announce it, didn't change my wardrobe, didn't reinvent myself in some dramatic, cinematic way. It was quieter than that, a kind of internal recalibration. I stopped assuming people told the truth just because I desperately wanted them to. I stopped believing loyalty was something anyone automatically deserved, and I stopped giving Evan the benefit of the doubt. That shift didn't happen overnight. It built slowly, through a series of moments that kept catching on my nerves like barbed wire. One of the earliest red flags came 6 months before the firing, the day Evan insisted we migrate our admin controls into a centralized interface he could manage more efficiently. His pitch was slick. Investors wanted transparency. Clients wanted uniformity. Our CTO, really just Evan's friend from business school, nodded along like it all made perfect sense. I remember standing in that conference room, my hair still growing back, feeling a strange tug in my gut. The old system wasn't broken, and he'd never cared about admin controls before. I pushed back, gently at first, then more firmly when he kept pressing. He brushed me off. "You're overthinking again. Let me handle the business side." That line again stung. It wasn't the word, it was the tone. The way he said it, like I'd become the unpredictable one. Like my trauma made me unreliable. Like he was doing me a favor by taking things off my plate. I knew then something was shifting beneath the surface. I just didn't know how deep it went. The escalation continued in smaller, sharper moments. Evan locking himself in his office for hours. Melissa hovering around my desk pretending she needed clarification on minor tasks she already understood. The CTO avoiding eye contact whenever I asked for repository access logs. The financials moving onto private servers. I was in the loop. For every week, I felt the walls inch closer, so I adapted. Quietly. I started waking up at 4:30 a.m. just to get into the office before anyone else. I combed through version histories, backups, legal documents, not obsessively, methodically. I wasn't searching for proof of betrayal, I was searching for inconsistencies, and they appeared one by one like blood blooming through cloth. Evan had been reallocating budget lines, hiding consultant payments, creating new shell entities tied to Melissa's maiden name, collecting signatures from board members on updated documents I'd never seen. The night I discovered a hidden folder containing early drafts of a buyout agreement that removed me entirely, I didn't cry or panic. I just sat in my office, staring at the screen while the skyline outside turned from orange to deep blue. That was the moment the transformation settled. I was done surviving him. I needed leverage, real leverage, not emotional pleas or legal threats he'd already outmaneuvered. That was when I revisited the old architecture, the foundation I had built before investors, before layers of compliance and outsourced dev teams. Buried in that earliest version was a dormant diagnostic script I had written 2 years earlier. At the time, it was nothing more than a tool to test system stability under load, but I saw what it could be. With the right modifications, it could become a silent audit, a mirror, a truth teller. Something that could expose everything Evan had constructed on lies, and more importantly, something he wouldn't recognize because he never understood the code as deeply as I did. Working on that script became my anchor, my secret. Every night, while Evan claimed he was meeting clients or reviewing pitch materials, I was rewriting the tool line by line. By the 3rd month, it wasn't a diagnostic script anymore. It was an automated cascade that would cross-verify financials, admin histories, and repository commits, then trace every fraudulent action back to the user who initiated it. It wouldn't destroy the company. It would expose him. Completely, but even as I built it, even as my hands grew steadier and my fear dissolved into cold intention, something else crept in: loneliness. Not for Evan, but for the version of my life where I wasn't planning for war. Some nights I'd pause, staring at the glowing screen, wondering what kind of person I had become. Then I'd remember the hotel room he lied about, the divorce papers he would soon weaponize. The way he said, "Terminated," like he'd been waiting to taste the word, and the hesitation evaporated, because the code wasn't revenge yet. It was survival. The day after Evan fired me, while the failsafe quietly crawled through the system, I drove to a small law office in South Charlotte. Not an expensive uptown firm, not the kind Evan would expect me to run to. This office was tucked between a Vietnamese bakery and a shuttered tattoo shop, an unassuming place where no one would think to look for the woman he'd just blindsided. The attorney was a man named Colin Avery. Late 40s, direct. No sales pitch, no sympathy, just a sharp mind and a sharper instinct for bullshit. I found him through someone who owed me a favor, someone I'd once helped get a start in tech. I didn't tell Colin the whole story at first, just the broad strokes. My husband and business partner had forced me out, manipulated documents, and was preparing a divorce designed to gut me. He listened, took notes, and asked one question that shifted everything. "Did you sign anything in the last 2 years without reading it word for word?" I felt my stomach drop. I was going through treatment. Some days I could barely think straight. He nodded slowly, already connecting dots. "And who handled the paperwork during that time?" "Evan," I said. "He said he'd keep things manageable so I wouldn't stress." Colin sat back. "Then I need you to be prepared for the possibility that your name is on documents you've never seen, and that he forged or coerced those signatures." I'd suspected fraud. I hadn't considered he might have forged my actual signature. But the twist wasn't that. It came when Colin asked for every digital trace I had access to, the backups, the early versions of the code, The admin logs I had quietly saved the night I sensed things were changing. I slid my drive across the desk. He plugged it in, scanned the directories, and then froze. "You said you built the original architecture alone?" he asked. "Yes, and Evan had no access to that version except the compiled interface." "Correct." Colin clicked into a folder I hadn't opened in years. A folder I thought was nothing more than deprecated prototypes, but I recognized the file names instantly because they weren't mine. They were Evan's. "What is that?" I whispered. Colin enlarged a document. It was a draft licensing agreement from our earliest days, a document Evan swore he never touched because he didn't understand the technical side. The metadata told a different story. He had accessed it at least 6 times. Modified it twice, exported it once. "Look here," Colin said, pointing to the timestamps. "These modifications were made right when you were undergoing your 2nd round of chemo." I felt a cold sweat form at the base of my neck. That doesn't make sense. He didn't have admin privileges then. Colin clicked one more folder. Inside it were messages, internal message logs I had never seen, Evan coordinating with the CTO and one board member, discussing how to shift intellectual property ownership quietly, discussing how to make sure the transition would appear voluntary if I ever challenged it legally. But the worst line, the one that changed everything, was from the CTO, dated almost a year before the firing. "Her health is unpredictable. You need to lock this down while you still have the leverage." Not after my cancer, during it. They planned the takeover while I was fighting for my life. I didn't breathe. I couldn't. Colin looked at me, calm but firm. "I need you to understand something. What they've done isn't just unethical. It's criminal. Fraud, conspiracy, misrepresentation, unlawful transfer of intellectual property. You weren't fired because they outmaneuvered you. You were fired because they realized you were getting stronger, and they needed you gone before you noticed." The room tilted slightly. All these months, I thought Evan's betrayal was personal, an affair, ambition, greed. It wasn't just that. They had built a coordinated plan to erase me entirely. And without realizing it, my failsafe wasn't just going to expose Evan. It was going to expose all of them. I left the office with my pulse hammering, a new clarity filling the empty spaces where grief had lived. My revenge wasn't just justified, it was necessary. I drove home with the kind of focus that feels like shock wearing a thin mask. My hands were steady on the wheel, my breathing measured, but inside everything had narrowed into a single cutting point. They hadn't just betrayed me, they had calculated it, timed it, leveraged my weakest days as if my illness were an advantage on a balance sheet. By the time I stepped into my townhouse, the sun was starting to sink behind the trees. The rooms were quiet, still holding the scent of the lavender candles I burned at night to sleep. I stood in the living room for a long moment, letting the silence settle. Then I walked straight to my desk. The failsafe was already running, silently gathering evidence, stitching together digital fingerprints in a web that would eventually reveal the fraud in unambiguous detail. But that alone wouldn't be enough. Exposure wasn't the same as annihilation, not in the world Evan operated in. He was too polished, too charming, too rehearsed. People like him always find a way to spin the narrative unless the facts drop like concrete blocks no one can lift out of sight. I needed precision, timing, strategy. I opened a new notebook, paper, not digital, and wrote at the top, "Plan, take back what is mine, make the truth undeniable." The steps formed slowly, each one deliberate, each one tied to something I now knew I could prove. Secure independent verification of the data the failsafe uncovered. Not just backups, chain of custody, third-party analysis, timestamps Evan couldn't scrub. Freeze all intellectual property transfer attempts. If Evan tried to license, sell, or restructure anything, it needed to trigger immediate legal intervention. Identify the weakest link in his circle. Someone who knew too much and trusted him too little. Gather proof of signature forgery. If Evan forged documents during my treatment, he wasn't stealing just the company. He was committing state and federal crimes. Control the narrative. Before Evan could paint me as unstable, emotional, or vindictive, I needed the truth ready, packaged, undeniable. As I wrote, my hands moved steadily, almost clinically. The The planning felt less like revenge and more like restoring a world he had smashed. But layered beneath the logic was something rawer, a deep, pulsing anger that wasn't loud, but constant. Still, even with all of that clarity, the moral line hovered in front of me like a doorway I wasn't ready to step through. Evan was a monster in his methods, but he wasn't a stranger. I had loved him. Once upon a time, I would have died for him. Part of me still recoiled at the idea of destroying someone I had shared a life with. But then I saw that message again in my mind. Her health is unpredictable. You need to lock this down while you still have the leverage. They hadn't just planned my removal. They had planned it while expecting I might not survive. That's when the hesitation broke cleanly in half. Around 11 p.m., my phone buzzed. I expected Colin, maybe a follow-up. Instead, it was a number I didn't recognize. A text. You don't know me, but I know what Evan did. If you want proof, meet me tomorrow. 9 a.m. Ramer Bearden Park. Don't tell anyone. My chest tightened. This wasn't in my plan. This was something and someone I hadn't accounted for. For a moment, I considered deleting it. Could have been a trap. Could have been Melissa. Could have been the CTO panicking. But someone reaching out directly meant one thing. Evan's circle wasn't as loyal as he thought. And if someone was willing to risk contacting me the day after my firing, then the conspiracy around me had cracks I hadn't yet seen. I stared at the message, weighing the risk, feeling the cold logic settle. I typed back one word. Yes. Tomorrow, I'd learn who inside his world was ready to defect, and whether they were trying to help me or clean up their own guilt. Ramer Bearden Park is always busy on weekday mornings, dog walkers, joggers, people cutting through to get to work, which is probably why the person who texted me chose it. Public. Neutral. Harder for Evan to spin into something unstable if anyone spotted us. I arrived at 8:55 a.m. The sky was a pale winter blue, sharp enough to make the buildings feel taller. I sat on a bench near the fountain, my back straight, my eyes scanning every face that passed. I wasn't nervous. Not exactly. More calibrated, ready for whatever shape this twist was going to take. At 9:03, a woman approached. Not Melissa, not the CTO. Someone I never expected, Caroline Hale, one of our early investors. Soft-spoken, older. A quiet presence in board meetings, the kind of person who wrote notes in a leather-bound planner while Evan pitched like he was auditioning for Shark Tank. I hadn't even known she lived in Charlotte full-time. She sat beside me without saying hello. For a few seconds, we just watched a kid chase pigeons across the grass. Then she said, in a voice that didn't match the calm scene around us, "He didn't fire you because he wanted you out. He fired you because someone warned him your failsafe existed." My entire body went still. I turned toward her slowly. "How does he even know about it?" "He didn't," she said. "Not until 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks, before the firing, before the staged confrontation, before the humiliation." "Who told him?" I asked. Caroline hesitated, and the breath she took wasn't steady. "I did." My pulse surged, a cold rush hitting the back of my neck. "Why?" She finally looked at me, really looked at me, with eyes that held something between guilt and dread. "Because he convinced me you were about to weaponize your code and tank the company out of spite," she said. "He said your health scare changed you, that you were paranoid, unpredictable. He told the board we needed to contain the damage before you did something reckless." I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth hurt. I didn't speak. I waited. Caroline continued, her voice cracking just once. "I believed him. I'd seen you withdraw during treatment. I'd seen you come back different. Harder. I thought he was trying to protect the company." Her hands shook slightly. "I didn't realize he was the one manufacturing the narrative until yesterday. After I spoke to a forensic accountant, he'd been secretly paying under Melissa's LLC. I confronted him last night. He denied everything. Then he threatened me." "Threatened Evan? What did he say?" I asked. "That if I interfered, he had emails that would redirect liability onto me." "Emails I've never written." My stomach dropped. Forged signatures, forged documents, now forged emails. Caroline swallowed hard. "I know now he's been orchestrating this for years, and I know the failsafe isn't malicious, it's truth. It's proof, that's why I reached out." I stared at her. "Why help me now?" Her eyes filled. not with sentiment, but with something closer to self-preservation wrapped in regret. Because I saw something last night that changes everything. Proof Evan has been preparing not just to erase you, but to disappear. My breath caught. Disappear, as in leave the country, she nodded. He's already moved money into accounts in the Cayman Islands and Dubai, hundreds of thousands. And Melissa isn't just his affair or his replacement for you. She paused. She's not even using her real name. I blinked. What are you talking about? Caroline reached into her coat, pulled out a folded sheet of paper and handed it to me. I opened it. A background report. Melissa's real identity. Lana Mercer, previously investigated for financial crimes in California. No convictions. No digital footprint in the last 5 years. A ghost with a new face and a new name. Evan hadn't just betrayed me. He'd partnered with someone who specialized in disappearing assets and burying corporate fraud. This wasn't an affair. It wasn't ambition. It was a long-game exit plan. One that required me gone, not just from the company, but from the map of their scheme entirely. Caroline leaned in, voice low and tight. He's planning to take the company's funds, flee the country, and pin the collapse on you. The cold inside me solidified into something absolute. My revenge wasn't just about justice now. It was about stopping them before they destroyed everything I had built and used my name as the wreckage. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch with the lights off, the city murmuring through the windows, trying to assemble a version of Evan I could understand. Not the man I once loved. Not the man who sat beside me during chemo. The man who had planned to erase me so thoroughly he was willing to leave the country with a criminal partner and let my name rot in the ashes of the company I built. By sunrise, I knew one thing. I needed to hear the reason from his own mouth. And I knew he wouldn't give it to me willingly, not in front of lawyers, not in a courtroom. He only told the truth when he felt powerful. So I gave him a setting where he'd believe he still had the upper hand. I emailed him at 7 a.m., we need to talk, 1 hour, neutral ground, coffee shop on Camden, no lawyers. He responded 2 minutes later. Fine. That alone told me he felt confident enough to indulge me. That, despite the failsafe running, despite the cracks in his circle, he still believed he had already won. He showed up wearing a suit I bought him 2 years ago. Same watch, same hair he always adjusted before important meetings. It made the coldness of the man inside even more stark. He didn't sit. He stood beside the table, arms crossed. Say what you need to say. I have things to do. I looked up at him, letting my face stay neutral. Why did you do it? Do what? He asked, feigning confusion so transparent it made my skin crawl. Don't perform, I said quietly. Just tell me why. He exhaled sharply, annoyed. Jesus, you're still stuck on this. You were becoming impossible to work with. You were paranoid, emotional, constantly revising code no one needed revised. The board was losing confidence. I made the decision that was best for the company. I watched him carefully. Try again. His jaw tightened. You weren't the same after chemo. You were fragile, unpredictable. We couldn't keep operating a multi-million-dollar business based on your instability. So you forged documents, stole IP, orchestrated a fake buyout. He looked away for the briefest moment. Not guilt, calculation. Then he leaned down, hands on the table, lowering his voice like he was finally tired of pretending. You want the truth, he whispered. Fine. He pulled out the chair opposite me, sat, and for the first time since this nightmare began, he let the mask fall completely. You were a liability, he said. Not because you got sick, I could have worked with that, the problem was you surviving it. The words hit like a physical blow. He continued, eyes flat. Do you have any idea how much ground I covered while you were in treatment? Investors listened to me. Clients trusted me. I ran the show. And then you came back expecting things to be exactly the same. But you weren't the same. You had this edge, this confidence. Suddenly you were questioning decisions, challenging restructuring, digging into documents that didn't concern you. He leaned back, expression chillingly casual. I realized something the moment you went into remission, the version of you that valued partnership, that deferred to my judgment. That woman was gone. And the woman who replaced her, she was going to take the company further than I ever could. Without me, he shrugged, almost bored. I wasn't going to let you outgrow me. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life being the less valuable half of the equation. I had the charisma, the business relationships, the social ties, but you had the mind. And once you got your strength back, I knew it was only a matter of time before everyone realized it. He paused, voice dropping into something colder than anger, something like resentment sharpened into hatred. You were always supposed to be the quiet one, the support, the builder. I was the face, the leader, and you forgot that, so I reminded you. My throat tightened, but not with grief, with clarity. He had betrayed me, not out of greed, not out of love for Melissa, not even out of fear of failure. He did it because my survival threatened his sense of superiority. He needed me weak. And when I wasn't anymore, he needed me gone. The truth settled inside me like a final lock clicking into place. He didn't just deserve what was coming. He had earned it with every calculated cruelty. And now I knew exactly how far I was willing to go. I walked out of that coffee shop without looking back. I didn't need to. Evan had already shown me the full shape of the man he'd become. Every question was answered, every illusion stripped clean. By the time I reached my car, the fear I'd been carrying for months had evaporated. What settled in its place was a steady, grounded certainty. I was done surviving him. Now I would finish him. The failsafe finished executing at 2:14 p.m. that afternoon. I wasn't at a computer when it happened. I was sitting in my lawyer Colin's office as he reviewed the evidence Caroline provided and compared it to the digital artifacts my script had compiled. Watching his face go from focus to stunned to grim told me everything I needed to know. "It's airtight," he said. "Every forged document, every fraudulent transfer, every insider message." He left a trail even a junior auditor could follow. But the failsafe hadn't just collected data. It had broadcast it. Every board member received a compiled report of Evan's fraudulent restructuring, the forged emails implicating Caroline, the offshore transfers tied to Melissa, Lana, whatever name she was using that month. Every investor received a package of documentation showing how the valuation was artificially inflated. And every regulatory point of contact, state and federal, received an automated submission containing timestamps, admin logs, and repository metadata linking every illegal action directly to Evan's credentials. It didn't tank the company. It protected it from him. It made him the collapse. At 3:07 p.m., my phone began blowing up. First a call from the board chair, then 2 texts from the CTO, short, panicked, rambling. Then a call from a number I recognized as one of Evan's closest investor allies. I declined all of them. By 4 p.m., Evan's professional world had already begun to burn. The board froze his access. Investors demanded an emergency meeting. A regulatory freeze hit the company's accounts to prevent further offshore transfers. His name, which he valued more than anything, was unraveling thread by thread. But I wasn't finished. At 5:22 p.m., Evan showed up at my townhouse and banged on the door so hard the frame shook. I watched from the living room window as he paced the porch, face red, hair disheveled, the self-assured mask completely shattered. "Open the door," he yelled. "We can fix this." I didn't move. Not until he shouted, voice cracking, "You're ruining me." Only then did I open the door, stepping out just far enough that he could see me but not come inside. "You ruined yourself," I said quietly. He tried to speak, but words tangled behind panic. "You don't understand. If you don't retract whatever you did, we're both going down. They think I committed fraud. They think I stole from you. You have to help me fix this." "I'm not going down," I said. "Only you are." His expression shifted, from desperation to disbelief to the realization that I wasn't bluffing. "Not this time, not ever again." "You think they'll believe you over me?" he asked, voice trembling but still clinging to arrogance. "They don't have to believe me," I said. "They have the truth, in your words, in your actions, in your signatures." He stood there, stunned, for a long moment. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "I never thought you'd fight back." "I know," I said. "That's why you lost." The police arrived 20 minutes later. Caroline had filed her own complaint, and regulators had escalated the case. Evan tried to approach me again as they cuffed him, but an officer stepped between us. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. Watching him get into the back of that patrol car didn't give me joy. It gave me something steadier. Closure. 2 weeks later, the board reinstated my ownership. Melissa, or Lana, vanished before authorities could question her. The company survived. Barely. But it survived clean. And me? I rented a small cabin outside Asheville for a month. No laptop, no deadlines, no Evan, just quiet, real quiet, the kind you earn. On my last morning there, I stood on the porch, the cold air biting my lungs, and realized something simple. They tried to erase me. But I'm still here, and stronger than they ever imagined.